I think we need to start with Brandon Aiyuk. He's making cryptic posts on Instagram. There's reports that the Niners and him are still far apart. I think I know where this is going. But then again, I thought he was getting traded. So I'd really like to know where you think this is going, Larry.
I don't get it. I get it from Brandon's perspective, Grant, from the standpoint of why wouldn't you want to wait until after Justin Jefferson and all the other receivers sign? Because every time a new receiver signs, the market gets redefined and it's almost always going up, up, up. So why wouldn't you? I get why Ayuk's camp says, you know what, we'd like to wait until after everybody signs and then sign. So I get it from their perspective. I just don't get it. How does this benefit the 49ers if they're planning on keeping Brandon Aiyuk to wait for it? They know the price is going up, and if they budgeted, let's just say for the sake of conversation, $23 million a year annually, and he's waiting so it can go from 30 to 35. Well, aren't you? I mean, how does that help the 49ers? And I don't understand what the Niners game plan is here to wait, because waiting costs you more money. The only way waiting works out is if you're somehow going to deal the player. And I don't get it from that perspective either. And I'll say this, if the 49ers trade Brandon Aiyuk for 2025 draft picks, I'm going to say it right now, and I'll do a video on it, and I'll do a live stream on it. It's an epic and utter and complete fail. If they wind up moving a player that is a core player inside their Super Bowl window for draft pick compensation that they won't get until after this upcoming regular season, that's an epic fail. The only way this works is if they sign him, or if they trade him for assets that help them win this year. Otherwise, it's a failure.
All right, let me try to see things from the 49ers perspective, which is what I generally do. Let me try to, because you're coming out real critical, and I respect it. Everything you just said makes sense. So I'm going to try to see this from the Niners perspective.
Yeah.
If they could have traded him for a first-round pick during the draft, they would have, right?
Sure, I would imagine.
Okay, so they couldn't, and he's here. It's possible that they agree with me or people who feel that spending all that money on Brandon Aiyuk isn't wise for them. That it's possible that Brandon and the Niners are just far apart and won't be able to bridge it. And the Niners' solution is, let's keep him, make him play on the 5th-year option, and then franchise tag him, and then trade him for a second-round pick next year. I mean, if the most you were going to get from him was a second-round pick this year, you could keep him, draft a wide receiver in case he holds out, have him one more year at $14 million, which is a freaking bargain, and then trade him for a second-round pick next year, which is the kind of thing the Chiefs do. I mean, they just did it with L'Jarius Sneed. They did it with Dee Ford. What do you think of that?
That could be the only solution. But, here's the thing about that solution. That includes, and you and I are both in this room, that includes basically telling a guy that that's been your number one guy, led you in receptions, your number one offensive weapon. You could make a very compelling argument is Aiyuk. You're going to tell your number one weapon, hey, sit there and shut up and take it. And we'll pay you when we're good and ready and not before. And we'll do it on our terms. And it's not about you. It's about us. That seems more combative than I think they are.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. The only thing I would say is
there any examples of that where they've done that, where they've basically told their guy, hey, just sit there and we'll pay you when we want to pay you? It seems like that would create acrimony.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they've made him an offer. It's not like they're saying to Brandon Aiyuk, look, buddy, we don't want you long term. They've said they want to keep him for his entire career. But if he's dug in at $28, $29, $30 million a year, I would say that they shouldn't give him that. I think that's a mistake. He's a great player, but they don't throw him the ball enough to justify that. So if he wants no less than $28 million a year and the Niners are unwilling to offer more than 24, 25, then what do? Do you just give him what he wants to make him happy? Or do you do what's best for your organization? I mean, if he
all enough period anyway, I mean, that's the other side of that. Should they just pay him and throw him the ball more?
Do they have the targets to, I mean, they have to target Kittle, Aiyuk, Debo, Pearsall, Jennings. They run the ball so much. generally don't pass the ball very much. I just don't know if they have the targets to justify it. They're not that kind of a team. They're not a drop back team. They're a play action passing team. Me personally, I mean, we argued this for months, but I think I made it pretty clear that I was against.
They're run heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I made it pretty clear that I'm against them extending Brandon Aiyuk, and not because I don't think he's great. So if this is what they want to do, keep him one more year at $14 million and trade him for a second round pick next year, I think it's kind of an interesting middle ground. And if it pisses Brandon Aiyuk off, it's business, man. I'm sorry.
It's extreme hardball. Question, I guess the question is this. One of the things that you and I witnessed firsthand, because I know we were standing right next to each other last year, late in the year, when George Kittle said, pay the guy like 24 million, 25 million. I think he might have even said 26 million, something like that. This is a teammate of his that's like politicking in the locker room with the media for the 49ers to pay this player. If they say, you know what? No, he'll operate on the tag and we'll deal with it next year. And yeah, if he walks away, we would get a third. So that's all right. We'll see if he can, we'll gamble on him having a big year and we'll try to get a second. In that way, at least they get the year out of him. But the question is, how good is he going to play if you've kind of flipped him the bird as far as the big money long-term deal that he seeks? And most wide receivers in the NFL don't get a second deal. This is like his one big payday. So you're kind of standing between him and one big payday. And he's already kind of taken.
Though it's not that simple, because again, it's not like they didn't offer him something. And what you just said with George Kittle, what was the number he threw out there?
23, 24, 25, 26,
25. 25 was the number we were hearing from play. Pay that man, $25 million man. We heard that from Trent Williams in the locker room. If $25 million a year would get it done, I think they'd be okay. But it's not going to get it done. Amon-Ra St. Brown's getting damn near 30. So that means Aiyuk's going to want damn near 30. And I think that's the problem here. Like, is he worth it on the open market? Yes. Absolutely. You can argue he's better than Amon-Ra St. Brown, but Amon-Ra St. Brown's getting about 150, 60 targets a season. So at least in that offense, they can justify it. Out here, I don't know if they can. I think the Niners probably understand that as well. And that's probably where the impasse comes in. I think it's okay to ask him to play out the fifth-year option. I'm sorry. If you want $30 million a year, you're going to have to wait a year and get it elsewhere. If you want $25 million a year, beautiful. I mean, it's not like it's a hardship for him to accept $25 million a year. If you want the extra money, great. Stand on business, wait a year and you can get it, but not here.
Yeah. But I mean, what's the impact of that on him, on them, on the room,
that's the
on
question.
His production?
The question.
That's you're kind of, you're shaking the dice and you're about to roll them on the table and you're not exactly sure what you're going to get.
Right, because I mean, he's one of your most important players, and now you're making him a complete malcontent. I mean, he could hold out the first 6, 7, 8 games, and then you're really banking on Ricky Pearsall to step up or whatever. I mean, this standoff could really cost the 49ers this season. So again, they have to weigh that. Do they just want everything to be hunky-dory, everything copacetic and happy? Then give him whatever he wants, and then that's your business model. Make your players happy.
Is it possible they've already agreed to some kind of terms and this reporting's erroneous, and that, because the one thing we have seen with the 49ers, and not just the Niners, lots of teams in football, they view every day as a potential risk. So why sign the guy anything more than 24 hours before he's supposed to hit the field?
Fair.
So, I mean, is that, you think, the game plan?
With Fowler, I mean, he's with an ESPN guy. He's reporting this. Best guess, where do you think his source is coming from?
I mean, Wagner? I don't know. I mean, Wagner's their embedded ESPN.
No. My best guess is that his Fowler source is with Aiyuk's camp.
The agent.
That's probably. Yeah. Hey, I just want you to know it's really no movement over here. Best guess, I think it's probably in Aiyuk's camp's interest to put the pressure on the Niners every few weeks. Remind someone that Aiyuk isn't getting what he wants and he's still unhappy, and that they want to be in the news cycle. So now he's back in the news cycle. Do the Niners want this to be something that people talk about every 2 weeks? Probably not.
Well, and then I've got to wonder, at least as far as what. Okay, so the 49ers knew that let's just say they weren't going any higher than 23. And this guy wanted more, and now and then I think it was Rappaport who said, coming out of wasn't it like the combine, that Rappaport reported that the Aiyuk camp wanted to wait until all the top receivers were signed before they signed. So if they knew that they were offering him 23 and that he wanted 25 and was going to ask for even more when the market reset, then you got to ask yourself, are they making the right decision in how they want to handle this? Wouldn't they have been smarter of just moving the player down the road and getting trade compensation, unless there was just no compensation that was even, I don't know what they were offered. Maybe they were offered nothing but a second round pick because you got to satisfy the contract as well.
If Ayuk's priority is to get the most money possible and the most targets possible, it may not make sense for him to have his second contract with the Niners. And when asked if he was coming back to the Niners at his locker after the season, what did he say? If it makes sense. He doesn't have to be here. He seems like his attitude is, if it makes sense. And I totally understand that. And I'm not that smart, but according to my calculations, it doesn't make sense. And so
it sounds like he's prioritizing. He'd rather get the biggest bag than, I think, all things being equal, if the money's equal everywhere, he'd rather stay, of course. Because the Niners are a good team. But if the money is not equal and there's somebody out there that's willing to pay him the big bag, it sounds like he wants the big bag over staying, and that he's prioritized that, and that he's spoken that reality to the Niners through his agent.
Yep. So if that means that he has to grin and bear it, making a mere $14 million on the 5th-year option this year, well, you know what? That's the price of you eventually getting $30+ million a year and maybe winning a Super Bowl on the way out. So yeah, you might be really pissed, but people have had it tougher. They might be able to work it out. Although it will be really interesting. Who am I to tell Brandon Aiyuk how to feel about it? And this could be a really big storyline that actually impacts the season.
Well, how would you evaluate if your guess is the way it's being handled and you're spot on? Then I'd be very critical of the 49ers. You're telling me that your best plan is to tell your star wide receiver, we're not taking care of you, just sit there and then hope that he, shows up enough, he's going to show up eventually to get paid, but doesn't hold out, doesn't derail your season, doesn't make himself an island unto himself in the locker room, doesn't, suddenly have, issuing these cryptic statements and emojis and all this stuff that can poison an NFL locker room. I mean, they're willing to risk all of that to save a couple $1 million on the contract.
Great question. Worth it? I think it's a wonderful question. Is it worth it? That's not really the question, though. The question is, would the Niners do it? And look at what happened with Buckner. Buckner wanted at least $20 million a year, more like 21, and he got it from Indianapolis. The Niners seemed to say no on principle. They were willing to offer what they gave Eric Armstead $18 million a year. So it seems like the Niners, and they seem to value Buckner and Armstead similarly. So it seems like the Niners and Buckner were about $3 million apart, and they ultimately traded him. If the Niners are willing to pay Aiyuk $25 million a year, which is the number that Trent Williams and George Kittle threw out there, but Aiyuk won't settle for less than 28, what's going to happen? Well, history suggests that the Niners might not budge on this one. They may not meet the player where he wants just to appease a 25-year-old athlete, 26.
Yeah. And yet, with Buckner, that was not the right decision. I mean, to me, you never move off of guys that command double teams on your defensive front seven. He did, and they did, and they, if they had kept Buckner, they probably get back to the Super Bowl faster than 4 years is what it took them to get back there.
Frankly, it's a lot tougher to find a 6'8" D tackle who's good against the run and pass like Buckner than wide receivers.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing is, the wide receiver room. I don't mind Ricky Pearsall as a player, but if you're telling me he's the replacement for Aiyuk, now I'm skeptical.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying I think Pearsall is the replacement for Jawan Jennings. Ayuk's going to be here for another year, and if he leaves next year and they trade him for a second-round pick, they could draft a wide receiver in round 1 again next year.
Yeah,
they really could.
I mean, they're loaded at wide receiver this year. I mean, they're only going to keep 5, maybe 6. They've got about 9, or maybe even more. They got about 10 or 11 wide receivers that are NFL caliber. So I don't know. What
I'm
I mean, so
interested to see Jacob Allen.
what do you think's going to happen this summer? Do you think
That's the question. Do
is
you think he'll be
is
there
he
tomorrow?
not going to show
No,
up? No, he's
I
not
don't
going
think
to be
he's
there
gonna be there tomorrow.
tomorrow. No
No,
way. But is he going to
no.
be there camp?
I think he may show up to camp, but I don't think he'll practice without a new contract. That's my best guess. And would he miss games this year? Maybe. It would cost him a lot of money.
This is not a wide receiver. Your number one wide receiver inside your Super Bowl year is not a guy that you want holding out. Now, if Nick Bosa wants to hold out and he's playing defensive end in a wide nine, simplistic, get up the field, sack the quarterback scheme, you can live with it. But a guy who's supposed to be locked in to your very complex offense with your quarterback who doesn't take any reps all summer, that's not only less than ideal, that's almost borderline malpractice on the season.
Sure. But if you were preparing to play hardball with Brandon Aiyuk and really dig in at $25 million a year, and you're expecting him to dig in at 28 or whatever, wouldn't you draft a wide receiver in round 1 just in case things went sideways?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, when they made that pick, a lot of people, me included, were like, how can you do this? How can you draft a 4th receiver on your depth chart or a guy who replaces someone next year? Well, you don't really know what their plan is for Brandon Aiyuk, and they may be bracing for something messy with Aiyuk, in which case they need to cover their ass.
And I think it's also worth adding that there are a lot of people, myself included, that were kind of critical because they took Pearsall over guys that I at least viewed as higher upside, right?
Mitchell,
Xavier Legette.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you told me that the real factor that was the most important was you need to draft a receiver, and you need to draft a receiver that could potentially play huge snaps for you this year, I might take Pearsall over those guys too. Because there's one thing that Pearsall has that those guys don't have is he's polished.
Right.
He's ready. He's more of a finished.
That's what I didn't get about the pick. It's like, hold on, you drafted a 23-year-old wide receiver who turns 24 this year, and he's for 2025. Make that make sense. Well, he may not be for 2025. He may need to play a lot this year, or at least early on, or in training camp. Who knows? And if he has a great training camp, if he looks like Brandon Aiyuk out there, all of a sudden the Niners can play even harder ball with Brandon. Hey,
here's the question I would have. Here's the other question I would have, Grant, is if they are planning on playing hardball, and either, he very easily could at some point this summer demand a trade, which he hasn't done publicly, and then maybe you're trading Brandon Aiyuk in camp, and it's like, if you're getting 2025 draft picks, I don't think that's going to fly. I almost feel like you'd have to, like, if the Raiders came calling, the Raiders now have Harrison Bryant, they have, Michael Mayer, and they have Brock Bowers. The Niners are thin at tight end. They said, I got to have the receiver, I'll give you a pick, but I want one of those tight ends that can help me this year. I'm just saying, it's like, if you move Aiyuk and you don't get an asset that can help you this year, man, I mean, that there's going to be an awful lot of people questioning why you didn't pull the trigger on draft.
And that's why they're not going to do it. Like, they're not going to trade Aiyuk and make themselves worse. And so that's why Ayuk's in a tough spot. Like, are they going to make Aiyuk happy just to make him happy? Doesn't seem like it. But are they going to trade him just to get rid of it? Like, get rid of a distraction? Doesn't look like it. It looks like they want to have the best roster possible. Feelings be damned. And if he wants to play games, they got Ricky Pearsall just in case. So I'm just going to.
That's extreme hardball.
Yeah, it is. And we haven't really seen them work that way, but they're kind of desperate. Like, this is the last year of this particular Super Bowl window. It's the last year that Brock Purdy's making no money, and soon he's going to be making all the money, and they're going to have to drastically change their team. And I think they're going to do what they have to do this year to win the Super Bowl.
It's really interesting. It's interesting on a lot of fronts. The one that's really interesting is if of all the positions on the football team currently, if you said to me, what spot do they have an abundance of riches and depth? It's wide receiver. Mm-hmm. They've got guys. There's no spot on this team for Chris Conley, for Trent Taylor,
Ronnie Bell,
Dave Martin, for Ronnie Bell.
Yeah.
There's not
there's
no jobs available for any of those guys. They have 11 receivers. They're probably going to go with 5. We know the first 3, and then they just drafted Cowing and Pearsall, so that's 4 and that's 5. So that means all these other guys are just going bye-bye.
Ronnie Bell is here to stay. I love Ronnie Bell. Don't you say that.
He might be their best ball. He might have the best ball skills of any of the receivers, including Aiyuk, JJ, all of them.
I like Ronnie. Honestly, if Brandon Aiyuk misses time, I'm going to have to be convinced that Ricky Pearsall is a better option than Ronnie Bell at receiver. Ronnie Bell as a punt returner is a damn shame. I'm sorry, Ronnie.
Ronnie Bell's got great hands. His dad is a college football wide receiver coach.
Tough.
He's really advanced.
Yeah.
But right now, he's probably looking at either getting traded or cut. So it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder if either if maybe the Niners are going to play super hardball with Aiyuk if he holds out and let him hold out and just say, hey, we'll replace you from within and you'll be back. Because doesn't he have to play by a certain week to get paid anything? Right?
Accrued season. Yeah. Probably has to play more than half the season.
Yeah. So he'd hold out and then, but I mean, that's wow. That potentially could be, just
what
the
a dark
biggest
cloud hanging over a season.
Yeah, that could be the biggest negative
Is that
story.
really what you want? Yeah,
not what you want at all. But
it's not what
we'll see what kind of hardball they're going to play.
Petey Boy says, I agree with both you guys. To be honest, I'd mostly do 27. He's great, but but we don't have the money. I'd put more in guarantees and roll with it. Garendo.